Today, we're diving into a theory, one that comes from some of the oldest writings on Earth that claims to completely rewrite the origin of our species. We're talking about a forbidden history filled with gods, gold, and, believe it or not, genetic engineering. Let's get into it.
So what does Anunnaki actually mean? Well, literally, it translates from ancient Sumerian to this. And according to the text, they didn't mean this as a metaphor. It was meant to describe a real race of powerful, advanced beings who traveled to our world hundreds of thousands of years ago.
And that leads us to the big, kind of crazy question at the heart of all this. It suggests that our existence wasn't some happy accident of evolution. Nope, it suggests we were deliberately designed for a very specific job. Let's unpack how this incredible story goes.
To really get this story, we have to understand that it doesn't even start here on Earth. It begins billions of miles away, on a planet whose atmosphere was literally dying, and its inhabitants launched this desperate, last-ditch mission for the one thing they thought could save them: gold.
So according to these interpretations, there's a 12th planet in our solar system, and it's called Nibiru. The people there, an advanced humanoid species, were facing total extinction because their atmosphere was failing. Their only shot was this wild mission across the solar system to find massive amounts of gold, which they believed they could use to patch up their world.
And what's just wild to think about is the timescale here. We're not talking thousands of years ago, we're talking almost 500,000. These beings, the Nibironans, show up, set up shop in Mesopotamia, and start this massive mining operation in what we now know as Southern Africa, a place that just happens to be super rich in gold.
But, even for a grand cosmic mission, you still run into some, let's call them human resources issues. Turns out the beings they sent to do the back-breaking labor in the mines were not happy. Not happy at all.
You see, there was this really strict hierarchy. You had the Nibiruan leadership, the supervisors calling the shots. And then you had the Anunnaki, also called the Igigi, who were basically the working class. They were the grunts sent down into the mines, and even though they were advanced beings themselves, they were treated like slaves.
Yeah, no surprise here. The Anunnaki eventually had enough, and they revolted. They refused to keep digging under these awful conditions. But their demand wasn't for better pay or more vacation time. No, they demanded that their bosses create a whole new, lesser being to do the work for them.
And this is where the story goes from cosmic mining to straight-up genetic manipulation. The Nibiruan leaders actually agreed to this demand, and that kicked off a whole series of frankly unbelievable biological experiments.
So the plan was, frankly, insane. They decided to mix their own advanced DNA with the DNA of the most evolved primates they could find here on Earth. The first results were kind of successful. They managed to create these super strong beings, perfect for mining. But they hit a major snag. These new workers couldn't reproduce.
Now this was a huge problem. It meant the gods had to constantly be in the lab creating more workers to keep the whole operation running. So the project leads, a chief scientist named Enki and a chief medical officer named Ninmah, went right back to the drawing board. They were determined to create a workforce that could sustain itself.
So they kept at it, right? This wasn't a one-and-done deal. They went through several versions, trying to get it just right, and eventually, they created a being that would completely change the future of this planet.
After more tinkering, they finally created Homo erectus, a version that could reproduce on its own. But, and this is a big but, along with that new ability, this new race also seemed to inherit a bit of that rebellious spirit from its creators. They also revolted, escaped the mines, and scattered across the planet, becoming what their creators called wild beasts. So it was back to the lab for one last try. This time, they used some seriously advanced tech, like in vitro fertilization. Enki and his new medical officer Ninti finally perfected the design, and the result? Well, it was their masterpiece, Homo sapiens, us, a race that was smart, capable, created, just like the old texts say, in their own image and likeness.
Okay, so at this point, the gods have a bit of a mess on their hands. They've got their brand new, sophisticated workforce, Homo sapiens, working away. But the rest of the planet is now crawling with their first creation, the rebellious Homo erectus. They decided they needed a hard reset.
The Nibiruan leaders knew a massive, world-ending flood was coming. It was just a natural part of Earth's cycle. And their solution? It was pretty cold. They just decided to let it happen. They agreed not to warn their escaped first-generation workers and to basically use the disaster to wipe the slate clean.
But here's where the whole story pivots. Enki, the head scientist, the one who had worked so hard on this project, just couldn't go through with it. He couldn't stand by and watch his ultimate creation, Homo sapiens, get wiped out. He felt we were too complex, too special. So, in defiance of all the other leaders, he decided to do something about it. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like an amazing sci-fi movie, right? Pure mythology. But hold on, because the people who believe this theory point to some real-world clues from modern science and archaeology that they say backs it all up. First off, they point to these incredibly old gold mines found in southern Africa, right where the story says they were. Then there's the whole mitochondrial Eve idea in science, the theory that all of us descend from a single female ancestor in Africa, which they see as a parallel. And finally, they point to the fossil record, where Homo sapiens seems to just appear, almost out of nowhere. Now, it's super important to say that mainstream science has very different explanations for all of this. But for the theorists, these connections are too strong to ignore.
So, where did this whole narrative even come from? It's really important to know that this specific interpretation was pieced together and made famous by an author named Zecharia Sitchin. He spent years analyzing ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets and laid it all out in his book series, The Earth Chronicles.
So, that's what it all comes down to, doesn't it? Is this a real, hidden chapter of our past, suppressed for millennia but hidden in plain sight in the world's oldest writings? Or is it just an incredibly powerful and epic creation myth our ancestors told to explain where they came from? For now, that's a question you'll have to answer for yourself.